Hey, 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 hey. Today we are talking about my favorite topic because it is the one that I do the worst. It's the thing that I probably struggle with the most. It's the thing I want the most. It's the thing that God is the most. And it is so challenging for me. So if you didn't see the title of this episode and you don't know what it is, drumroll, compassion. Compassion. Whew, compassion. You know, I'm struggling for words because it's not only that it is difficult to have compassion for other people. In fact, the person it is most difficult to have compassion for is ourselves. And obviously, this is why we struggle to meet other people in compassion, especially in fights, especially in disagreements, especially in conflict, right? We're like, so what if you have a perspective? La, 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 I'm not listening. I don't want to hear. I can't open a space in my heart for your pain. Only my pain is relevant and you have to feel bad for me, So yeah, compassion, it's real. Compassion is real, yo. And it is I'll just say it right off the bat. I mean, this is one of the most important psychological understandings that we need to open, and one of the pathways we really need to navigate most, because how does God call himself? Wow, that was an Israeli sentence to the max. How does God call himself, right? So, when God is self-identifying, we learned this out from the Yom Kippur service, and perhaps you've said this before and you didn't even know what you were saying. We cry out, Hashem, Hashem, kel rachum v'chanun, herech hapayim, v'rav chesed v'yemet. So we have all of these different qualities. It says, God, God, you're so compassionate and merciful. And then it goes on, slow to anger, and all these other beautiful qualities. But quality number one is called compassionate. God is a compassionate God. God has mercy for us. God actually always gives us better than we deserve. It says that when you hit a challenge or a difficulty in life or pain, you should say, thank you so much, Hashem, because I know I deserve so much worse. Not because you're a schmuck or a loser or bad, but because the nature of the world is that it runs off of the fuel of compassion. In fact, Kabbalistically, we know that there were worlds before this one that did not work out. And why? Because God was using the attribute of deen, of judgment, of justice. So what's the attribute of deen or judgment of justice? Well, if you say, one name calling to me, you'll just blast up because God's like, what? You would hurt your friend? Like none of us would survive a day. We'd speak one word of Lashon Hara and bam, we'd drop to the floor dead. So that didn't work out very well because God created, a world of judgment for these creatures called humans. And y'all know us, we know ourselves. We would not survive a day if proper judgment was being meted out on us. I mean, even if you look in the liturgy or you look in the Siddur or you look in the Machzor, you'll see that we have all of these sins accrued. Well, maybe you don't, I do. And these sins, they have their punishments listed, and they're like stoning, decapitation, like strangulation. And these are sins that I do, like not intentionally, of course, but so it's like, wow, if we lived in a world of judgment, we'd like just burn up right away. We'd just be like, who knows what kind of pain, we wouldn't make it. So God kind of redid the formula for the world, and he decided, no, the world needs to run off of compassion. And then in Yom Kippur, we call out, like I was singing before, these 13 attributes of compassion. And as we all know, we Jews, or actually all the humans in the world, we are meant to imitate, to emulate God. We are meant to be like God. So as it follows, it should be that if God's number one quality is compassion, that we should be doing some really serious work on how to be compassionate. And I have to tell you, listen, this is not easy, right? I just got into a little tiff with someone, and a friend said, well, can you practice compassion? I'm like, no. No, I don't have the emotional space, but we'll talk about that later. That's compassion. This is what we're really, really supposed to be rewiring the neurological pathways in our brain to align us with a compassionate way of living, a compassionate way of speaking, a compassionate way of hearing, a compassionate way of seeing, a compassionate way of thinking, please God. But again, as you know, if you've been watching many of these episodes or just learned with me before, one of my pet peeves is when people tell you to be a certain way, but they don't explain how, right? Be compassionate. How? No one ever taught me. Like, they were teaching me like geometry and like calculus. Like, why didn't anyone teach me compassion instead? So thank God we'll do a little bit of catch up from all these years of knowing what was right and knowing what's the best way to behave and knowing how to imitate God, but how? So we will begin with a story. And this story actually genuinely changed my life. 100%. I never knew the way that the story unfolds, as I will share with you. I didn't know that such a compassionate way of living was possible. So are you ready for the story? Okay, here's it goes. So this story is told about Rabbi, that's English and Hebrew together, Harav Shlomo Carlebach. I hope that in my lifetime I could claim to be a student of his, because he really was such a man of compassion. He really saw everybody as precious and valuable and struggling, and he saw low lives, let's say, as like really holy souls that had fallen the lowest. You know, this Torah, oh perfect, there's a brick wall. There's this Torah that I learned in my seminary from it was either Julie Gila Lowell or Sarah Tzadok, so we'll give them both credit because I don't remember who really taught me. But basically on a brick wall, the highest brick falls the lowest. Right? If you have a brick in a brick wall and the brick on the bottom like falls out of the bottom layer to the floor, so nothing's really going to happen to the brick. It's just going to, maybe a chip will come off. But if you have a high brick wall and a brick falls from the top and it shatters to the ground, that brick is destroyed, it's broken. And Reb Shlomo really knew this. He knew how to see humans for what they are, which is people that have fallen low are probably coming from a very high source. And this is a super Kabbalistic idea. If you want to look more into it yourself, Rabbi Nir Menusi of Chabad Chassidut also talks a lot about Yaakov and Esav, how we think that Yaakov was this highest light because Yaakov is Jacob, because he was like such a good guy and so pure in learning Torah. And we view Esau as like this like crazy wild ass of a man, and like, meanwhile, the source of Esav's soul was coming from a higher realm of that of Yaakov. So anyways, all of this prep is just to give you a concept of who Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach was and how he tried to approach the world, really not using eyes of judgment. But so anyways, here's the story. So the scene is set in New York, and Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach is often known for walking around with a guitar, right? I don't even know if I could, let's see if I could do it. And he's like walking down the street of like, Broadway or I don't know those streets in New York, but like Fifth Street or whatever. And he's like singing, like, oh, that's not the note. Let's say he's, he's walking down the street, he's doing his thing. And, let's say he's singing like Am Yisrael Chai, right? Am Yisrael Chai. And he's just walking down the streets because he was known as like the rabbi of music, and he was doing his thing and he's singing a song, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. And Rabbi Shlomo, he always had this like distinct look. He would kind of wear like a vest, and he had like a big tummy, and he kind of had like frizzy Einstein hair, and he would wear the big Jewish star necklace. And so he's just walking down the street. He always had his guitar with him, always giving people blessings, and he's doing his thing, and he's singing his song, and he's just going about life. And all of a sudden, a robber comes up to him and shoves a gun in his head and says, "Mother Blanker, give me all your freaking money." So, okay, now just for a moment, take yourself out of the story and imagine if that was you, the terror you would be in, the fear, the anger that might arise, So he's got the gun in his back of his head, and Reb Shlomo says to him, yeah. Oh, no problem, my sweetest brother. Yeah, cool. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll give you all my money. And the guy's like, what? Sweetest brother, I just said to you, give me your freaking money, you old man. Give me your money. And he's like screaming at him, And Reb Shlomo's like, yeah, my brother, my sweetest friend, just listen. the only problem is I just don't have that much money with me. But if you want, like, I could take you to the ATM and we could get some more out. And the guy's like, crazy? Are you crazy? I said to you, give me all your freaking money, old man. Give me all your money right now. And Reb Shlomo was like, yeah, listen, bro, I only have a few dollars. So if you want more, I'll take you to the ATM. You could come over. I'll make you dinner, but you just got to do me one favor. Could you please just drop the gun? And the guy's like, oh my God, you're psycho. I'm going to freaking kill you. I'm going to kill you if you wait another second. Give me your wallet right now. And Reb Shlomo says, okay, my sweetest brother, I promise you, I'll give you everything I have. Just please, can you give me a hug? And the guy's like, what? Do you not hear me? Are you crazy? What are you saying? Give me a hug. Did you say give me a hug? I'm robbing you. What are you doing? And Reb Shlomo's like, yeah, bro, if you will just give me a hug, I will give you everything I have. I will take care of you. I'll look for you for more. Just please, just drop the gun and just please give me a hug. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? What are you saying? I don't want a hug. I want your money. And Reb Shlomo says to him, listen, my sweetest brother, if you had to have it so hard in your life, if you had to be in such difficult circumstances that on one of the days of your life, you had to go out and go to the gun store and buy a gun, God, you must be so scared and worried, and you must be in such tough times, and you must be in so much pain. And I can't even imagine where you're at. So please, bro, just drop your gun and give me a hug. And the guy's like, I didn't want your money. I just give me your money. And Shlomo's like, just drop your gun. Just give me a hug, man. Just give me a hug. And the guy, the robber, just like broke, like, and like drops his gun. Like, I don't know if he dropped it on the floor, he gave it to Reb Shlomo, but he fell into Reb Shlomo's embrace and he held him tight. And they hugged there for like, I don't know, like an hour or something like that. And Reb Shlomo kept true on his promise, and he took him to the ATM and he got him some money. And I'm not 100% sure if he took him home or whatever it is, but you might want to ask me, Neely, how do we know this story? And how do we know this story is true? Well, because this guy became a student. He wasn't Jewish. He didn't convert. It's not a conversion story or anything like that. But he started learning Torah with Reb Shlomo every day, I think for like the rest of their lives, or at least for years, some extended period of time, until this guy really turned his life around and like came to be able to tell the tale. And why did this one action change this man's life so much? Because Reb Shlomo was able to see him with eyes of compassion. With eyes of compassion. And when I heard this story, it literally revolutionized my life. Granted, I was a bit younger and I'd never seen anyone act like that, but perhaps I wonder, have you ever heard of anyone acting like that? It's just shocking. I mean, he did not take it personally, and he was able to have so much. I don't know what he was even able to have so much, but he was able to not take it as a personal offense or as an attack, but as an opportunity to see another person with compassion. And again, I'm telling you, I never heard of such a concept called eyes of compassion. I'd never seen anyone act that way. I come from a boot camp house, you don't do your chores, you better get in line. Like, God bless my compassionate parents, but I was raised like strict and firm. I didn't even know that somebody could be treated nicely if they acted out of line. So hearing this story, it really opened my heart and it opened my eyes, and I decided to try to practice it. Now I know this concept as a therapist that hurt people hurt. In other words, if someone is ever hurting you, it is only because they themselves are in pain. And you can reverse this. If you are ever hurting another person, let's say you're lashing out, you're in a fight with somebody, your partner, your spouse, your child, your friend, your neighbor, the only reason that you're acting like a maniac, and I don't say that because you act like a maniac, because I act like a maniac and I end up screaming and I end up cursing and I end up saying mean things or acting cruel or evil or venomous, for sure. Okay, Hashem help me. But the only reason I'm acting like that is because I'm hurting. We do not hurt people when we're la-di-da fine. We hurt when we're hurting. Hurt people hurt. So that we could assume that anyone that is ever acting out against us is either mentally unwell, but probably we don't want to assume that for fear of condescending, or they're hurting. They're in a lot of pain. So I tried it out. I tried this out myself. And on two amazing examples. One time I was traveling in Italy, and I guess I was by myself for whatever reason. I'm not sure. I think I was backpacking in the Alps. And then I went over to Slovenia. Whoa, my God, the most beautiful country in the world besides Israel. So there I was in Italy, and in Italy, it's like France. It's notorious that they don't speak a lot of English, So anyways, I was trying to buy a train somewhere, and I don't speak Italian. The guy at the desk was really obnoxious. He was really mean and short-tempered, and thank you, Hashem. I had a moment. I was like, okay, Neely, be like Reb Shlomo, be like Hashem, be compassionate. So I took myself and my annoyance out of the picture. And I looked at this guy, and listen, you got to clear your heart before you try to say anything like this, or else you're going to come off really not looking nice or not genuine. But I looked at this guy with my heart full of love, and I said to him, are you okay? Seems like you're having a really hard day. And in 1 minute, he looked at me and he melted. He's like, yeah, I am. It's like, all right, yeah, just come sit down. Let's just work this out. And I was like, oh, it works. Oh my gosh. So then I tried it again. And I tried it even more volatile circumstance here in Israel. Because everybody knows that Israelis are called sabras, right? A sabra is the Hebrew word for a cactus, right? So we're really sharp and pokey and harsh and brutal on the outside, but on the inside we're sweet and yummy smelling and delicious. Because we're raised in the Middle East. All of us here in Israel have been through war and conflict and bombs and rockets and pain, and we're high strung. Our whole nation was through the army, and so a lot of people literally have PTSD, and so our culture, we're sharp with each other. Okay, that's just what it is. But I'm still from polite Los Angeles, where you say, hi, how are you doing, how can I help you today, right? That's customer service in LA. Even if the person's in the worst mood ever, they're like, thank you so much for coming, whereas here, I just went to a banker the other day, and she was like, what do you want from me? And that's normal, right? But on one particular day, I was getting onto a bus, and the driver was not having it. It was probably a hot day. I don't know, maybe his air conditioning wasn't working, but he's just like, Yalla, get on the bus. What are you waiting for? And I'm 2 feet away from him, but he is just reaming me. He's just like, why? What is your problem? I told you I can't even do the house. He's just flipping out. And I had the opportunity again to say, okay, Nini, compassionate eyes. Try to look with eyes of compassion. So I didn't respond. And then I get up to in Israel, you buy the ticket at the bus driver guy. And so I'm buying my ticket, and I looked at him, I was like, sort of similar to the train station. Is this been a really annoying day? Have people been this so annoying to me? He's like, yeah. And not only that, and this is all in Hebrew, but he's like, not only that, but and he just goes into, he's like, my mom didn't call me back, so my wife is upset, and everyone's yelling at me, and And I was like, oh, and I was just able to have compassion for his story. And literally within a minute, the whole situation had flipped on its head. And he was my best friend. And he's like, and I bless you to be married, and I bless you with children, and I bless you to be at your Brit Milah, and thank you so much. And in milliseconds, we were okay, obviously not best friends, but blessing each other, literally. And I was like, wow, it works. Now, I haven't practiced it as of that much lately. So maybe recording this episode for you is a perfect motivation for me to tune back in. But you'll notice when you don't want to go to compassion, it's literally coming from a place of ego. I mean, myself included. So ego, they say, I'm not sure if this is Rabbi David Aaron or Rabbi David Sachs, but ego is an acronym for etching God out. So when my ego flares, the space for godliness, which we can now basically replace with the word compassion, gets smaller. The more I'm thinking about myself, the less capacity I have for godliness and compassion, ego etching God out. So if you ever have resistance to being compassionate to a person, we can know that our ego is getting in the way. And okay, we'll talk about how to loosen that in a moment. So I thought these were unbelievable stories. I think that to be a witness, to testify that working with Eyes of Compassion really works, I'm so grateful to be able to share that with you. And now I want to take it even a step deeper. So always when you're studying concepts in Judaism or in Torah or in Hebrew, you want to check the Hebrew because there's often great profundity within the Hebrew words itself, because the Hebrew words are, most of them, at least the biblical ones, are divine. And therefore you can find all these hidden truths within their letters, within the combination of the letters, within other words that you can find in there, and so on and so forth. So does anyone know the Hebrew word for compassion? Rachamim. The Hebrew word, and again, I don't know if this is backwards. This is going to just be the struggle of this whole course that you just bought into. You might have backward signs. The word for compassion is rachamim. And now my question is, if you had to understand, if you had to take a deeper meaning or pick up on some of the letters or figure out what's within this word, do you see any other words that are connected to rachamim? Can you find any other Hebrew words in here if you're knowledgeable in Hebrew? Okay, so this is really cool, right? So some people, usually people say mayim, water, and that's awesome. Like if you see water in it, because water does flow and water fills the container of where it is, and water purifies. So yes, that's great that that mayim is in rachamim, but there's something that's even more profound. The first three letters of rachamim are rechem, and I'll write it for you the way it looks in singular, because in singular we used a mem sofit and not the other one. So rechem, the mem would transmute to become the mem sofit, rechem. Now, does anyone know what the word rechem means? Here we go. Now, if anyone is too young, that was like Jeopardy. It was a talk show host, and when they waited, that was the song we played. Okay, what's a rechem? All right, here we go. A rechem, believe it or not, is a womb. A womb, like the part of the female body. It's like, oh, right, because mothers are nurturing and compassionate. Mothers are not nurturing and compassionate because they're mothers. Mothers are nurturing and compassionate because they have a rechem. So now we're going to do a little bit of a physiological explanation and an exploration of what is up with the womb and why the womb actually does anything to help us understand compassion or how to be compassionate. Okay. So what is the womb? So physiologically, the womb is the only body part on either male or female that is designed completely to serve the needs of another. The womb is designed for another. The womb has no specific purpose in the woman except for to, foster menstruation and therefore hold a child, to grow a baby. The womb is like, there's no other body part that's made for someone else. I mean, exclusively, like even our private parts, they're there to also assist us in our situations of life. But the womb specifically is the only part which is there for another. So already we can begin to understand that it is the place where we turn our attention to another, to selflessness, to others' focus and consciousness. And not only that, but what does the womb do? It's a place that makes a space for someone else. This is so profound as well, because when God created the world, according to Kabbalah, God existed everywhere and there was nothing but God. And in order to create a home and a place for us to grow and struggle through this crazy life journey, God had to make a space within himself. And then through there, he shot the light of the Or Ein Sof. And then from there, within that, the universe was created. But first and foremost, so too, just like God, in order to create a space for us to grow and live, he had to make a space within himself So the female, the feminine, and again, within every male, there is, feminine and masculine and so on and so forth. So you're not excluded from this. We just learned that from the female. A woman does the same thing as God. God makes a space in the world for us to exist. That's also why God is called Hamakom, the place. Because my teacher Leah always teaches that God is called Hamakom because he makes a place for us in his heart, but also in his world. I mean, he literally created the whole world just for us to exist. And again, not just to exist, because we certainly are not born perfect creatures. We're born messed up. And boy, if I tell you the sins I did before I did tshuva and the sins I did after I did tshuva, like it's not like God making a space for this like righteous angelic being that is Neely. Like, holy cow, do I have my darkness and my not such pleasant things that God's not want in his world. And yet God makes a space for me. And so too, we learn from the womb, we make a space for the other, but not just while they're perfect and angelic and going to brighten up your life. Think about what a fetus does to its mom. Poor mothers. And everyone should, get to be a mother, please God, if that's their interest in the right time soon. But a mother holds a baby that is, first of all, just like, look at it. It's like slimy and gross and weird. It sort of looks like a tadpole, and it's a total leech and parasite. A fetus is 100% a leech and a parasite. It only takes, and while it's taking, it also elbows her and sticks its butt in her pelvis and her head in her backbone and like giving her all this heartburn and acid reflux and like pushing up on her lungs and pushing down on her bladder, making it hard to breathe, making it hard to use the restroom, making it hard to sleep at night. I mean, geez, these fetuses do not make it easy on the mother, right? And I sometimes wonder if that's what God's reaction to us is, like, oh, facepalm, these humans again, destroying the environment, making wars, making my world a really uncomfortable place to live in. And still the mother holds the baby in that womb. And still the mother says, I'm going to hold you here. I'm going to give you a place to grow. I'm going to give you understanding that in the meantime, while you're growing, I can still give to you. And I know, most importantly, that you're a work in progress. Nausea, puking, pain, swelling, moodiness, impulsivity. This fetus makes the mother's life, I mean, hopefully all pregnancy is smooth and easy, but like a living hell. Cravings and loss of appetite and starvation. It's like, you could not, there's like almost no part, some women bust out in pimples and they have pigmentation on their face and their noses expand and their lips expand. And like, boy, this just does not make this, it messes up their, it can mess up their intimate life. Like it creates problems with the future children. You can't drive, you can't bend, you can't, whoa. And so funny that like the rest of us humans that aren't busy growing babies, we forget that this is the rechem. This is the root of the word rachamim. It's where we make a space for someone else. We make a home for them, a safe space, a place of comfort. We carry them. We take care of them. We nourish them. We allow for their growth, even when they're just like a slimy, leechy creature, because we know when we tune into our maternal instincts, which is really our godly instincts, when we do that, we understand that everybody around us is just like a fetus. We're all a work in progress. We all make it uncomfortable and less good for other people sometimes. And yes, like a baby, we will be a blessing into people's lives and we will contribute eventually. But in the moment that a woman is called to hold upon a fetus in her womb, that thing is all take, no give, all pain causing, and still she holds them there. So I deeply, deeply believe that we can learn how to be compassionate by really thinking about the rechem, the womb, and what it does and what its place is. One of the things also about, we learn the word savlanut, which means patience, because it's hard to have patience for another person when they're being leechy or when they're in progress or they're not developed or they're actually physically hurting us. It's really hard. But within the word savlanut, which is patience, is the word seva, which means to suffer. that you're not really patient just because you smoked a fatty and you're chilling, or like you took a Xanax, or like you just a super type B personality and nothing bothers you. That doesn't mean you're patient. It means you're type B or a stoner or a chiller. Patience, even for a chiller, is that place in which first there's a bit of sevel. You got to suffer through it in order to be godly. Because godly, you don't win the prize of godliness or patience or compassion by just tolerating what's already easy for you to tolerate. That's human. Sure, someone comes in my house and they clean up after themselves and they are polite. Like, I'm not godly for being nice to them. I'm like, cool, I got a good guest, you know? Doesn't call upon me. I don't have to pass any tests. I don't have to survive any patience. I don't have to pull out my compassion if everything is easygoing. It's dafka, specifically where people are doing what a fetus does, making us uncomfortable, making us feel like we want to vomit, making us feel like exhausted, making us feel whatever, everything you could think of. What we're doing is we are fostering a place of growth and understanding. And that when we begin to understand that this is what we're here to do for other people, instead of like initially with God, so with so much harsh judgment, to open up a space and realize, you know what, even we are also leechy sometimes, and all of us are needy. Okay, like if you watch the MVC video, you'll understand that. Some of us are afraid of being needy, and so we make ourselves really independent and really capable, right? But that's not because I'm not needy. That's because I was so afraid of being needy or unwanted that I made myself into a super capable human. But either most of us are either needy or we have a fear of needy, and it really ties into the same thing because we're here together. We're here to help each other be here on this world. No one gets out alone. No one survives this alone. And unfortunately, in our Western culture, you know, many of us grew up in a house where you didn't know your neighbor. It was so separate. You never need to ask anything anyone. You never need to ask for money. You never need to ask for help. We were all financially independent. We could hire a maid. We could hire a banker. We could hire everyone we needed. And you take care of yourselves. But that's not how the world started. And that's not how we operate. We operate in community. We need each other. And sometimes we are snotty and slimy and gross and uncomfortable making like a fetus also. So let's not deny that about ourselves. Sometimes we really are snotty and obnoxious and annoying, and we need to take money, we need to take help, we need to take someone to cook for us because we're sick. We need help, we need advice, we need someone to talk to us on the phone. Okay, so you're a fetus, you're in progress. But if we can understand this about ourselves, then maybe, hopefully, we can start to see with eyes of compassion. In fact, in the book Orchot Tzadikim, it says that just as one would want to be pitied in his time of need, pity, and not in the like modern lingo way of like, oh, woe is you, self-pity, but like one is, the word in Hebrew is she'erachamu, it comes from the word compassionate. Just as one would want someone to be compassionate to him in his time of need, so should he be compassionate to others who are in need, as it is written in Vayikra 19:18, and you should love your fellow man as yourself. So it quotes here. It quotes, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, as a way of beginning to understand how we need to be compassionate, as it says in Tehillim in Psalms 145:9, and his mercies are upon all of his works. So it says about God. And so too, believe it or not, even when we are annoyed with somebody, even when it seems like they're leeching off of us, it is incumbent upon us to use this womb analogy in our mind and to use the stories of Reb Shlomo being compassionate on the robber or my success at the train station on the bus, to really have these eyes of compassion and understanding that when someone is hurting us, it is because they are hurting. And the way to be the most godly is to try to access this midah. So I'll just share a teaching that I learned from Avraham Sutton from the Kabbalah and another story, and then we'll come to a conclusion. Okay, just checking my notes, make sure I got everything in here. Yeah, okay. So I was at a friend's house years ago, and they had brought in Rabbi Avraham Sutton, one of Jerusalem's great Anglo-Kabbalists, wise man, author of incredible books. And we were doing a meditation. We were bringing up, we're just doing this very intricate, beautiful meditation. And the end of the meditation was coming to the understanding that compassion, what does it do in this world? What is the function? Why should I be compassionate, right? Like, great, God is like that. Like, yeah, it's really hard and I'm gonna have to suffer for it, but like, what's it gonna do for me? Lefi Kabbalah, according to the Kabbalah, compassion banishes hatred. And so I've also led plenty of meditations with my students where, and I believe this is the meditation he led us to, is, and maybe I'll invite you to do it right now if you like. Yeah, why not? Let's get into a really cool meditation on compassion. So basically, I invite you to close your eyes if you want to, or if not, you do you, boo. And we want to just start breathing sweetly, softly, and slowly. Taking sweet, soft, slow breaths. And you want to imagine yourself with a group of people that you really love, people that you personally invite into the scene. You're in a field. It's however you want it to look. Either it's beautiful with high grasses and flowers and you can see forever, or alternatively, there's trees surrounding you. Maybe there's a gazelle in the field. Maybe there's a stream. You could imagine whatever flowers you want. And you're breathing sweetly, softly, and slowly. And you want to invite in people who truly believe in you. And they're going to look in your eyes and let you know how much they believe in you and how much they believe you could do whatever mission is ahead of you. And breathing sweetly, softly, slowly. You want to look into the eyes of every person around you and see their belief in you and see that they know that your inherent intrinsic nature is compassion. And just without saying any words to each other, just exchanging these looks with the people in front of you, and you could fill your eyes up with tears about how much love you feel for them and how much love they feel for you. And you're just going to go face to face and imagine how much love and how much belief these people have in you. And you're going to invite them to hang there. They're your support team. And I invite you, breathing sweetly, softly, slowly, to see next to the field on the path in front of you, a path that leads up a mountain. And even though the mountain is quite an incline, it is not difficult to climb. You'll just take step by step. And I invite you to sort of wave goodbye to the people behind you. Know that they're there supporting you. They're your team, but you're going up this mountain alone. And you walk up the mountain step by step. And as you get to the top, you know you're there for a mission. You know you're there to share something important. And finally, when you get to the top of the mountain and it's just you and God, you see something magnificent and amazing. You see all of humankind standing before you, looking up to you, waiting to receive the message from you. And all of a sudden, you feel from within you this unbelievable voice that emerges from your depths, breathing sweetly, softly, slowly, and calls out to the whole of humanity. Compassion banishes hatred. Compassion banishes hatred. And imagine yourself, seeing yourself at the top of this mountain, sharing this message with the whole of the world and hearing them receive it. Compassion banishes hatred. Breathing sweetly, softly, slowly. You can descend the mountain and go into the arms of your team who supported you. You can bless each other with compassion, for you did it. You understood. You gave the fixing. You gave the teaching. Breathing sweetly, softly, slowly. You can stay there. You can do it again. You can revisit this later. You can come back to our current present moment where we know truly that compassion banishes hatred. I'm going to give another story for this, and then we're going to actually take it one step further and talk about compassion for self. All right. So one more story with Rabbi Shlomo Karlibach that really blew my mind, that I really, really loved. So about having eyes of compassion is he was controversial in his day because he came out of a line of ultra-Orthodox rabbis that practice Judaism in a very specific way. And part of the specificity of the way that they practice Judaism, there's a lot of division between men and women for the sake of being appropriate and kosher and not having sexual issues between the men and the women, as is today with many of the ultra-Orthodox communities. There's a lot of separation between gender because they really want to make sure that they have sexuality clean and in order, and avoiding a lot of the problems of the modern Western world between male-female dynamics. Okay. So with all due respect to the people that practice Judaism like that, God bless them. Thank you so much for being our strict ones. We're grateful for you. But Reb Shlomo, Reb Shlomo was Lubavitcher Rebbe's first shaliach. Reb Shlomo was a Talmud, of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the famous Menachem Mendel Schneerson of Chabad, the guy you see on all those paintings, or on the pictures on the wall, for Chabad. You see him also his hand in the air sometimes. So anyways, Reb Shlomo was like his number one dude. And initially, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he sent Reb Shlomo off to college campuses in the 60s because he knew that a lot of the Jews were assimilating, and that that if we didn't send, rabbinic people out there to try to bring Judaism back to these college students, that they were just going to fall off the edge of the world and we're going to lose all these Jews. Well, Reb Shlomo was going out to places like San Francisco in the 60s, and college students in San Francisco in the 60s, like, they're not going to stick around if you say, okay, men over here and women over here. This was like the sexual revolution. These are the hippies. It's all free love. And, so Reb Shlomo realized that he had to take a different path than the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and they blessed each other on their way, but they couldn't work together anymore because the Lubavitcher Rebbe was holding down the fort for the ultra-Orthodox. Thank you so much. And Reb Shlomo was going to hold down the fort for those of us that were already sort of, within Western culture. So he was controversial because he would give Torah classes with mixed men and women. He would, have them dancing in the same room for the sake of holiness, but that's not something that was traditionally acceptable within the last, 50 years or anyhow. So this was all background just to tell you that he was controversial in his time, and people really did not, like, some of the ultra-Orthodox world, they really did not like him. They thought that he was destroying Judaism. So anyways, the story, that's all back up to tell you the story. So one day, Reb Shlomo, who always had his cronies and his posse around him because he was very charismatic and very well liked, by the people who did like him. So one day they were going to the Kotel, to the Western Wall in the old city of Jerusalem. And as they were going there, this ultra-Orthodox guy, socks up to the knees and the whole gear and the black hat, comes up to Reb Shlomo and he hawks a loogie, and he spits this loogie in Reb Shlomo's face. And it says the story, the loogie was like the snot, like green and yellow, like dripping from Reb Shlomo's face. And this guy is screaming at him, cursing him, not that this behavior is acceptable for anyone, but okay, we all make mistakes and this happened. So and we know the story because all the people that were there that witnessed it. So he's screaming at Reb Shlomo, "You're destroying Judaism, you're destroying the Torah, how dare you, low-life scumbag." And meanwhile, the loogie is dripping off Reb Shlomo's face. And here's what the story goes. Listen to these eyes of compassion. Listen how amazingly he didn't listen how amazing. Like, imagine someone spits in your face. I would become a monster. I would probably go at them with my fists. You spit in my face, my ego and my dignity flare. And I'm like, I'm gonna kill you, right? But not Reb Shlomo. Reb Shlomo had eyes of compassion. He only saw, wow, listen what he saw. He turns up to heaven. He turns up to Shamayim, and he says, Ribono shel Olam, wow, look at how much your people want to serve you in truth. Because all Reb Shlomo could see was a man. All he could see was this guy's needs, that this guy so badly loved God, even though he didn't do it in the right way. He loved God so much, he loved the Torah so much, that to anyone that was considering making an offense or a problem with Torah or Judaism, that he was willing to do anything to set this man straight. And all Reb Shlomo could see is, wow, God, look at how much your people want to serve you in truth. He saw his pain, he saw his need, he saw with these unbelievable eyes of compassion. Is very impressive. It's very impressive. And we could see that, I'm sure that in that moment, that when Reb Shlomo treated him like that in return, first and foremost, the compassion was banished from Reb Shlomo's own heart. But I imagine the people around who may have been hating on this guy, or this guy who may have been hating Reb Shlomo, the heart melts. Compassion melts the hatred out of our hearts. Compassion, says the Kabbalah, banishes hatred. Now, this course is not complete because we cannot be compassionate with others until we are compassionate with ourselves. So I'm going to give an on one foot about how to be compassionate with self, but maybe we'll spend a whole nother day learning about the inner critic and self-compassion. These are imperatives. They're necessary. You can look it up online. There's a lot of amazing videos on YouTube about the inner critic, but I will give you one biblical example, because after all, this is Torah and psychology. So I learned this from Rabbi David Sachs in Los Angeles on the Parsha where Abraham has to take Yitzchak, Abraham has to take Isaac up to the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, the famous story. All right, because now we've just done a little bit of shift in how to be compassionate with ourselves. Because again, it's nice to say, be compassionate with others. Think about this womb teaching. Think about the rechem and the rachamim. Think about how compassion banishes hatred. Think about seeing with eyes of compassion. Think about what does it mean to have a womb and all these things, or someone's annoying us, we still make you, okay, that's great. But first we have to do it to ourselves. Also, I'd like to make a disclaimer. I do not mean by any standard that if someone is mistreating you or you feel uncomfortable in their presence, that you have to go against your own instinct or your own intuition to get away or to make space. You do not and must not be a martyr if anyone is mistreating you, to put yourself in a place where you're not comfortable or not okay. If you feel triggered or unsafe or uncomfortable, or the way someone is treating you is inappropriate, then you have to mediate and know when it is time to have compassion, when it is time to take space or get away from said person. We must never do anything we don't want to do. If you do not have a stirring in your heart for compassion, you cannot pray that out, then walk away, because whatever we do resentfully, we pay. Whatever we do that we don't want to do, we pay the price in resentment, and that is not worth it. Okay, so that was my disclaimer. This is not about becoming a doormat or a wet rag or being a friar or a sucker when someone is being mean to you. God forbid. You stand in your power, you treat yourself well, and you demand that you're treated well too, kindly. But this is for times when you already are standing in your power and you can then exercise this compassion and patience. So back to the biblical story of when Abraham was bringing Isaac up to the altar. So we want to ask ourselves, what words did God use to tell him to get there? And the answer is the following pasuk, Kach na et bincha. That means, please take your son. Now listen, there's nothing superfluous in the Bible. So therefore, if God is saying, Kach na, please take your son, we see that in Abraham's greatest challenge, God was still speaking nicely to Abraham. And what does this mean for us? How does this have to do with me having compassion upon me? Because the number one way that we do not have compassion for ourselves, there's other ways as well, but the number one way we let the hate rage and we forget to awaken compassion is in our thoughts with the inner critic. And instead of saying, please, Neely, please get up out of bed and don't press your snooze button, it's time to start your day. Some of us have voices in our head that are cruel or mean or uncompassionate or evil, or get up, what are you waiting for? You're such a loser, you slept in, you wasted the day. All these horrible, horrible, mean thoughts. Basically, what this Torah comes to teach us is, if the voice in your head is not kind and polite, it's not saying please, like the way that God spoke to Avram in the hardest test, then this is the voice of the Yetzer Hara. This is the voice of evil. This is the voice of hatred. And we must stop it immediately and say, hey, you may not speak to me that way. We'll get into this more in my course in narrative therapy and healing as well. But hey, you may not speak to me that way, dear Yetzer Hara hatred. And you want to find a place in your heart where you could also find the eyes of compassion for yourself. If you're hurting, you must be hurt. Then can I have empathy and compassion and rachamim on myself? Because if I am not practicing it as a practice in my own life, when it comes to having eyes of compassion for other people, those skills won't be there, right? It's like if you're not training for the marathon and one day someone says, hey, come run a marathon, you can't do it. But if you're already in training for the marathon, then someone says, hey, come run a marathon, you got this, or at least you'll be far more ahead. So point is, yes, we must begin with self-compassion. We must practice self-compassion in every single circumstance, even if we mess up horribly. The only way that God will have it is if we're speaking nicely to ourselves in our head. And again, it is imperative, because then when we need to call upon those eyes of compassion for the difficult circumstances in our life, because again, when these difficult circumstances come up, we're usually triggered or flustered or upset. So we really, really have to practice seeing with eyes of compassion on ourselves in order to exercise it on others. And so my blessing for us in this amazing teaching about the rechem and the rachamim and the womb and eyes of compassion is to see if we can emulate God in these 13 qualities of rachamim, of compassion, by beginning with the way our voices in our head speak to us. And then as well, being able to see if anybody is hurting us or yelling at us or being mean to us, can we stop and say, wait, I bet they're hurting too. And like Reb Shlomo with the robber say, wow, you must have gone through so much pain to get to this place if you're being so mean, frankly, right? But we'll keep that end part out. You must be in so much pain if you're going through this and talking to me like this. And then what? And then we can proceed from there, from a place of softened heart and compassionate eyes, and a place of sweet, sweet rachamim, and we will truly behave in our godly selves if we can do this. So may we be blessed with so much success. It's not easy. We have to keep trying. And please God, may we lead more compassionate lives for ourselves, for others, for the whole wide world. May we be the leaders and emissaries for the whole wide world to understand how to behave with compassion. Thanks for listening.